Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on auto title lending in Illinois. We're excited to have you here. Just wanted to start off with a few housekeeping rules. So we are recording the webinar, so this will be available. We'll be sending this out along with the slides. And we have muted all of your phones, but later we will have a time for questions and answers. And so we'll ask that you use the chat box to submit your questions. Feel free to also let us know using the chat box if you're having any technical difficulties. My name is Jody Blaylock. I'm a policy associate at Heartland Alliance in the Illinois Asset Building Group. The Illinois Asset Building Group is a statewide coalition committed to expanding access to the tools families need to build financially secure futures. We advocate for policy and program solutions that address the growing racial wealth gap, and we provide technical assistance to help organizations across Illinois build and strengthen their financial empowerment programs. So before getting to today's agenda, I just wanted to give a little bit of background of how we came to examining the issue of title lending in Illinois. So a few years ago, we were hosting racial wealth gap roundtables in communities across the state. At every roundtable, at least one community member mentioned how title lenders were stripping wealth from their communities. So out of that, we decided to partner with the Woodstock Institute to take a deeper look at title lending in the state. So that led us to release a joint report released just last week called No Right Turn: Illinois' Auto Title Loan Industry and Its Impact on Consumers. So we'll be presenting all the findings from this report today. So today we're going to start off just by talking a little bit about what title lending is and go over the current Illinois law as it relates to title loans. And then Spencer from the Woodstock Institute will review all the findings from the report. We're going to highlight some real stories from borrowers around the state. We'll end with policy and program recommendations out of the findings, and we'll also have a time for Q&A. So just to get us all on the same page, title loans are a type of high-cost, small-dollar loan. They are secured by the title to the borrower's automobile. So consumers who own their vehicle outright can take out a title loan for a fraction of the assessed value of the vehicle with very little underwriting for the loan. Title loans often have triple-digit interest rates, and they can lead borrowers into long-lasting cycles of debt. And we'll be talking more about these interest rates and how they sort of trigger these sort of spirals into debt a little bit later on. As far as current law goes, title loans are really exempt from a lot of the existing consumer protection laws. So title loans are just one of 4 high-cost small-dollar loan products regulated by the state. The General Assembly in Illinois passed legislation in 2010 to create consumer protections for payday loans, payday installment loans, and small consumer installment loans. But title loans were not included in that process. So the other 3 high-cost, small-dollar loans have some existing consumer protections, but title loans really do not. There are a few limited regulations for title loans. While the legislature hasn't taken action on title loans, the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, so IDFPR, which oversees title lenders, instituted new administrative rules in 2009 that provide some regulations for title loans. So these do the following. They require all title loans to be fully amortizing and repayable in equal installments. So what this does is effectively eliminates balloon payments. It limits the loan principal amount to $4,000. It ensures that no monthly payments, including principal and interest, exceeds 50% of a borrower's gross monthly income, and it does require verification of income. It allows for a refinance only if the principal amount has been reduced by at least 20%. It institutes a 15-day cooling off period in between loans, and it requires lenders to report loans in real time to a central database, and then to use that database to determine a borrower's eligibility for a loan or a refinance. So there are, some regulations in place. As you'll see from our findings, really these regulations don't go far enough for consumers. So we'll talk a little bit later about the type of regulations that we want to see on title loans. For now, I want to introduce Spencer Cowan from the Woodstock Institute. Spencer is the Senior Vice President for Research and leads Woodstock's Applied Research for Economic Security program. As the SVP for Research, he produces major research reports and oversees Woodstock's Technical Assistance Program, providing hundreds of hours of free TA to community-based organizations annually. Spencer worked really hard on a lot of the findings that you see in the report, so we're excited to have him here to talk about all these findings. So Spencer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Jody. Yes, I'm very pleased to be here to be able to present some of the findings. And my role is to present the data that we have about auto title loans in Illinois. Unfortunately, IDFPR, which collects data, refused to provide us with the loan data that we would like to have had to analyze. And so we've had to use alternative sources, including 2 summary reports that IDFPR published and court records from 2 district courts in Cook County. By looking at the differences in the data in the 2 reports, we've been able to determine how auto title lending changed between the period covered in the first report, which was April 2009 to September 2012, and the period added in the second report, which went from October 2012 to the end of 2013. And looking first at the income level of borrowers who are using title loans, we can compare that to other small dollar loans that are regulated. And you can see from this slide that nearly 3/4 of the borrowers using title loans have income of under $30,000 per year, and 91% have income of under $50,000 a year. Title loan borrowers are actually lower income than the users of other small dollar consumer loans, which suggests that these loans are targeted at the households of people with the least ability to repay and afford high interest loans. Using data for full years, not including the data from 2009, which only covered part of the year, you can see that the number of loans and the number of customers is increasing rapidly. Unique customers, counting only single-year customers, are up 31% between 2010 and 2013. And the total number of loans is up 23%. The fact that there are more loans than customers shows very clearly that consumers are borrowing more, taking out more than one auto title loan in a single year. And there are about 13,000 to 15,000 repeat borrowers in any single year. But looking at the overall numbers, it actually gives you a better idea of, because people take out not only more than one loan in a given year, but will take out loans from year to year. We can estimate how many people take out repeat loans by looking at the total number of borrowers for the entire period covered in the second report, which is April 2009 through the end of 2013. And that's about 257,000 borrowers. But the number of loans is about 364,000. So that shows that about 108,000 people, about 30% of auto title loan borrowers, took out loans, multiple loans. For thousands of borrowers, auto title loans are not a one-time occurrence to meet a unique situation. They're a recurring problem for the consumer. When we compared the average interest rates in the two reports, you can see that the average interest rate in the earlier report was about 285%. For the period added in the second report, that average interest rate dropped down to 234%, which, while lower, is still incredibly high. At the same time, the average loan term increased dramatically. It went from just under 13 months in the first report to over a year and a half in the second report. So even though borrowers are paying a slightly lower interest rate, they're paying it for a much longer term. Overall, the average monthly payments stayed about the same. It dropped very slightly from the combination of the lower interest rate and longer term. So it's down from $227 a month to $220 per month. Remembering that nearly 3/4 of auto title borrowers had income of less than $30,000 or $2,500 a month. This shows that they're paying about 9% of their gross income for a period of a year and a half just to cover the loan. And the effect is that the overall loan amount and finance charge people are paying, the average loan amount is up about 22% from just under $900 to almost $1,100. And the average interest and fees went up 48% from about $2,000 to just over $3,000. And what that means is that the borrowers are now paying $2.76 for every loan dollar they borrow. And that's even despite the lower interest rate. Put another way, between April 2009 and September 2012, the period covered in the first report, borrowers paid an average of about $14.6 million per month in finance charges. Because of the increased number of borrowers and loan amount, between October 2012 and December 2013, auto title loan borrowers paid an average of about $25.2 million per month in finance charges. To see what happens in the real world, we actually went beyond the reports, and looked at court records from Cook County in District 1, which is the Daly Center downtown, and District 6 in Markham, which is south of the city. We looked at 58 cases that had been filed to collect on auto title loans that had defaulted. And all of the loans were originated between April 2009 and July of 2013. This is not a random sample. It's not something that I would say represents all loans, but it does give us a real-world check on what's going on with auto title lending. And we can't draw broad conclusions, but the data from those 58 court cases are consistent with what we see in the data from the IDFPR reports, that loan amounts are increasing and the finance charges are increasing, and that's consistent with those findings. Additional observations that can be made from looking at the court case data is that there's a significant amount of internet lending. These are not all cases where the borrower is in Illinois. In fact, 6 of the borrowers were from either Indiana or Wisconsin, and 25 of the borrowers were from other states. All of the other state cases were in Markham, filed by one lender, Turbo Title Loan, and were made, in some cases, in states where auto title lending is not allowed as a matter of state law. And in 19 of the cases that we looked at, for loans that were made since 2010, did not list the collateral on the loan documents, and that's required by Illinois law. And so we can see that lenders are lending where it's not allowed by state law, and they're not complying with Illinois law. And that's just from the small sample of cases we were able to look at. And on that note, I will turn it back over to Jody.
Thanks, Spencer. So in addition to looking at the data that we did have access to, we also talked directly to borrowers to better understand the direct impact of title loans on their lives. We found that many families are struggling financially with stagnated wages, little savings, and strained credit histories. Illinois families have few options when trying to maintain their financial footing. A poor credit history limits a consumer's access to more traditional and affordable forms of credit, such as safe small dollar loans and credit cards. So then many of these vulnerable families turn to high-cost small dollar loans, such as title loans. The lack of alternative safe banking options in communities across Illinois really exacerbates the problem. So we're going to just take a minute to introduce you to a couple of these borrowers that we talked to. The first is Paul, whose photo you see up on the screen. So Paul lives with his 2 teenage daughters in the town of Fairmount, Illinois. And then in December of 2014, so just last year, his wife of more than 20 years died suddenly of a heart attack, and this was after a year-long struggle with lung cancer. So after that, his life was pretty shaken up. The $8,000 that he had in funeral costs and medical expenses put Paul into debt and strained his credit, but he kept working hard. He works in the manufacturing industry, kept working hard to try to stay afloat. After months of financial stress and stress from the death of his wife, Paul had his own heart attack in March of this year, of 2015. And that caused him to be out of work for 4 weeks. He was struggling to get by and to support his daughters. By April of this year, Paul felt like he had run out of options, and so he took out a $2,000 title loan to try to make ends meet. And he started making the monthly payments of $450. I'm sorry. Then in June, Paul was injured in an industrial accident that caused him to lose part of his fingers. When he received the settlement from the accident, he wanted immediately to go and pay off the title loan. He called the company, and they explained that he was accumulating about $15 in interest per day, which hadn't totally registered with him up to that point. So when he went and paid it off in September, so he took it out in April, and when he paid it off in September, Paul paid $2,400. So in total, he paid about $4,200 for the $2,000 loans, and that's with him paying it off early. So if he had not paid it off early, he would have spent over $10,000 on the $2,000 loan. The second person we're going to take a look at is Mark. So Mark lives in Chicago. He's retired. He took out 2 title loans over the course of a few years, which you can see here. The first loan he took out because of an emergency, and the first loan was for $1,095. You can see here, even though the average interest rate that Spencer talked about before is, in the 200s, Mark's interest rates on both of his loans was over 300%. So that average, there are still title loans that have over 300% interest rates. So Mark's first loan was over $1,000, and the total that he owed on that was $6,609. Then he was trying to pay that off, and he was paying it off as quickly as he could. And while trying to sort of get back on stable ground, his car broke down, and so he needed some extra money for the repairs. So he took out a second loan for $1,500, the same interest rate from the same company, and you can see there that the fees were well over $7,000. Again, a loan term of 2 full years, so think about paying 304% interest on a loan for 2 years, and the impact that can have. So the total that he owed on that loan was over $9,000. So when you take a look at the total that Mark borrowed, it was $2,595. The total he owed based on that was nearly $16,000. So you can sort of see there in the graph the comparison of the amount that he took out versus the amount that he owed. So the sort of combination of the high interest rates and the long loan terms leads to really the stripping of wealth from communities. So we wanted to end with some policy and program recommendations for what can be done to provide more consumer protections for title loans. So this slide really shows our recommendations on the federal level. The first one is that we expect the CFPB, so the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they are going to be releasing rules soon, and we anticipate that they'll include new rules for auto title lending. So we're hoping that those rules will include regulations requiring stronger underwriting for title loans. On the legislative side, federally, we would like to see Congress pass legislation that institutes a 36% interest rate cap for all consumer loan products, including title loans. And this is based on sort of a precedent set by existing law. So the Military Lending Act caps small dollar loans for members of the military and their families at 36%. So we would just like to see that protection expanded to include all consumer loans for all consumers. On the state level, you know, in lieu of the federal action instituting a 36% interest rate cap, we would like to see Illinois pass a 36% interest rate cap on all consumer loans. So that would require the Illinois legislature to strengthen the Consumer Installment Loan Act to institute the 36% cap, but also they can do things like institute maximum loan terms, and they can strengthen the ability to repay standards. So there's no reason why Illinois can't do those things on its own in lieu of federal action. There's also no reason that the data collected by the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation shouldn't be publicly available. As Spencer talked about, you know, there were many challenges and barriers faced in getting the data that we needed from them on title loans. So we recommend that IDFPR should publicly release loan level data from the state database to allow advocates to do a more detailed analysis and monitoring of small dollar lending in Illinois. The last one is really geared towards financial institutions. So a big issue that we saw in some of the stories is lack of access to alternative loan and credit products that are safe and affordable. Rural communities and communities of color in particular are there's a need for increased access. So we recommend that financial institutions should create and market affordable small dollar loans with ability to repay standards as alternatives to high-cost predatory products, including title loans. We also, just before ending, we wanted to make sure that all of you were aware of the Consumer Complaint Database housed by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They receive complaints about a whole wide range of consumer issues, including payday loans, title loans, any sort of predatory lending. So if you work with someone who is taking out these loans and you have concerns that their rights have been violated, you know, if you think that the lender is acting outside of the law, you can have them submit complaints using the website on the screen or by calling that number. So we're going to open it up now to a time of Q&A. So you can use the chat box to submit any questions that you might have. So we've got one question. Well, we got a couple of questions relating to legislation. So basically asking if legislation currently exists or if we anticipate getting legislation passed in the next 12 months. So there's not really current legislation. The closest thing to that would be that we are expecting the CFPB to issue rules soon that include title lending or title loans. And so we're hoping that will include stronger underwriting. We plan on commenting as part of that process and encouraging the CFPB to make really strong rules. The CFPB cannot institute interest rate caps. So as far, the state legislature or Congress would need to take action in order for that to change, to have a 36% interest rate cap. Right now there's not legislation. We will be thinking about what legislation we want to move here in Illinois coming out of our findings of this report. But right now there's not current legislation. We have another question about what is the interest rate as of today of title loans. Spencer, I don't know if you want to take that one.
I will. Thank you, Jody. The average rate that we saw in the report was 234%. But in looking at the court records, I saw that it varied enormously. I think the lowest I saw was 108%, and interest rates of 300+% as Mark was being charged are not uncommon. So I think it varies, but somewhere in the 200 to 300% range, and that's again now being paid over a longer period of time. So this isn't a 1 month, you pay 25% in 1 month. This is 300%, 200% for 18 months, 2 years.
Great, thanks. We have another question. Are there educational campaigns aimed at helping to warn consumers of the high costs of these types of financial tools? So I can answer that question. I can't think of any particular educational campaigns targeted at consumers in particular. What I can say is that the CFPB puts out a ton of information for consumers about all sorts of issues. So I would highly recommend their website for tools that you can give to clients, for information, things like that. There also are there are campaigns around advocacy for predatory lending. So for instance, in all of our media about this, we have been using hashtag Stop the Debt Trap. So that there are a number of sort of nationally coordinated advocacy campaigns around predatory lending. But as far as sort of a coordinated educational campaign for consumers, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I think the CFPB could be a good resource for tools that you can use with your clients. Just going to wait and see if we get any more questions here. So that's all the questions that we've gotten. You can see up on the screen is my contact information as well as Spencer's contact information. So if you have any questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. We do hope and plan that there will be some next steps taken, hopefully around advocacy to get stronger protections for consumers. So we do hope that you'll sort of stay tuned for those next steps and be a part of that and stay engaged. So thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good day.